Good morning and welcome to this weekly market update from MRC Markets. Today is the 10th of February 2014. What we'll do today is go through some technical analysis on Euro Dollar, Cable, Dollar Swiss and the Aussie. We'll not make any trade calls recommendations in this video. Trade at your own risk. If you could please read our full disclaimer on our website www.mrcmarkets.com, that would be great. For any new followers out there, we have three moving averages on each of these charts. The red one is a 55 simple moving average, the purple is a 100, and the gold is a 200 simple. So yeah, just going to review what's been going on in the markets in terms of technical analysis, and just trying to give some sort of outlook for the week, really just focusing on any interesting setups that are out there. We'll have a brief look at the weekly charts. Obviously, as it's a weekly video, we don't want to dwell too much on them. And then look at the sort of daily 4-hour and 1-hour charts. Okay, then let's have a look. This is the Euro Dollar chart. This is the weekly. So let's have a brief look at this one. It's good to look at the weekly just to sort of keep things in context. We've spoken about this many times before. This setup's still in play, obviously. The fib moved from the highs of 2011 to the lows of 2012. Sellers coming in at 61.8. But you can now see last week's candle. Let's zoom in a bit. Last week's candle we had a brief bounce off of the 50% here, acting as support. So buyers really trying to keep this above. So it's very interesting to see, and just good to keep in mind. Really, I mean the sellers still technically in play on this move, but it's just to keep in mind. And unless we get a sort of weekly close above the 61.8. then I'd say that it's still a sort of short setup, but it's still in play. The bears shouldn't be worrying too much in terms of that. And in terms of just, I mean, as it's a weekly video, let's just look at last week's candle and see if it can give us any sort of indications. We've spoken about these highs before at the 136s. We got sold off at them, and then of course the 61.8 as well. But in terms of last week's candle, a bullish candle, nothing majorly of interest though, not a bullish engulfing, so it's not really giving us a huge indication of what could happen in terms of this week. I mean, personally I wouldn't be surprised to see it go up a bit, form a bit of upper wick and then come back down. So that will move us on nicely to the daily chart, where there is a setup that I think could sort of influence that. In terms of the daily, you can see we're sort of getting caps at the 50-day moving average here, and but sort of stuck in between the 100-day as well. It's good to keep in mind these fibs as well, in terms of what is still. I mean, let's just bring it back to this one. So the buyers are still trying to keep this one up and sort of breaking these highs. Want to see a break of these highs at the 0% level, which is 1.3832s. But you can see we've topped out here, and this is a real key resistance, these 1.38s. But in terms of shorter term moves, what I personally be focusing on is this fib here. So from the highs to the lows there, see what happens if we get up at this 50%. You can see its previous resistance as well, so it should be quite interesting. We get up there, keep an eye on the price. Actually, if we get some upper wicks, maybe then I think we should see some selling action later into the week. And then of course, if just flip it down to 4-hour actually, and zoom out a bit. Flip it out to the 4-hour. The shorter term sellers, we're looking at sort of each dip to draw your fibs, are looking for this 61.8% hold. So keep an eye on the 4-hour close. If it's a reversal pattern, then we should come back down, but if it's looking like it's trying to peek its head through and close above, so maybe it wants to close above and then test this bigger fib. I always personally prefer the bigger fibs. I think they're the more sort of obvious ones. So for example, this is the 4-hour chart, it's just taking the high of the 4-hour chart to the low. Clear move, clear downtrend. It's just fibbing the move of the whole downtrend. So key level for the week, if we get up here, is the 50%, which is at 1.3685s. And then of course, if we want to flip it down to the 1-hour chart, I mean, it's been quite messy, quite sure. We had this sort of chop zone here, and then we had NFP, a much weaker number there, and we really shot up So yeah, it's just sort of grinding higher, to be honest with you. And let's say it does retrace, then you'll get a lot of short-term players, I'd have thought, sort of fibbing this move. It's not the greatest of moves, I don't think. But let's say we do top out here, then this 50% has some previous support as well. It's also previous resistance as well. If you look to the left, and you've got some moving averages lining up here. So that's at the 150, the 135, 65s there. And yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of euro really. Let's have a look at the cable chart. Cable, in terms of a brief look on the weekly, we've spoken about this many times, how it's been sort of topping out at this the sort of 165s. Key 165 level. We also looked previously to the left of the chart here. We have big spikes there, and we've had multiple sort of 5 candle wick spikes high. Failures at this key 165 level, and it's just trying to retrace really. You can see last week's candle, there was some buyers coming in desperately trying to push it back up, but we still got a red candle, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this continue to retrace into this week and over the next few weeks, to be honest with you, and come back down towards these key moving averages. So yeah, in terms of the weekly, I'd say the bias is bearish for the week, definitely. And then of course, if you flip it to the daily, the obvious fib, which we're still a long way away from, is this one here on the daily. So the 50% comes in at the 1.5740s, and it also coincides with previous resistance to the left of your chart here as well. So previous resistance could turn into support. Let's look at the shorter term time frames, and what I'm personally been focusing on this week is all about this fib level, because I mean I personally say the bias, it's been due a retracement for a long time, but I mean the bias is still holding it up, so there's no reason why it can't keep on grinding higher. But in terms of sort of selling opportunities, I'd personally be looking at this fib here. The 50% comes in at 1.6460s, and you'll switch some key moving averages flattening out around that level, and then of course the 61.8%, which also coincides with that big resistance we spoke about at the 165s. So if we do get a pop higher, then keep an eye on that. That should be the key line in the sand there, this sort of 50%, 61.8% range, because you've got that key level there in there as well. And in terms of the shorter term moves, in terms of shorter term fibs, then similar to euro, you've got this, if you flip it down to the 1 hour, then look, I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of short term players looking at this 1 hour move from the low of this 1 hour chart to that recent swing high. The 50% comes in at 1.6339s, and also coincides with previous resistance around here as well, very similar to euro. Let's flip it back to that euro. So we spoke about that 50% coincides with previous resistance, very, very similar on this cable chart. But you can see it's currently getting supported by the 100-hour moving average here, which is quite interesting to see. So there's nothing stopping it to grind higher, but let's say if it does retrace, then that'll be a fib which should be quite interesting. Okay, that's cable done. Let's look at the dollar Swiss. Dollar Swiss on the weekly is still really just not interesting. The only thing that is interesting really is this key support, which is propping it up at the minute, and that comes in at the 0.8893, so let's just call it 0.89s, and that is currently holding the pair. So it's just good to keep that line on the chart, just in terms of perspective really. Let's flip it down to the daily. The daily's been quite messy recently, just sort of chopping inside this range. I mean, we've spoken about these fibs before, so how the sellers have just been grinding it lower. That was one there, really nice one. And then you have this fib here, so just literally just bringing the highs down to the previous swing highs, and the significant lows, 61.8, holding that lower. And then if you extend that low down, then you can see the 50% of this move comes at the 0.9127. That's been holding it currently over the last sort of few weeks really. Well, pretty much from the start of January. But you can see on this daily chart, that key level that we left up on the weekly, the 0.89s, is the key line in the sand for the bulls. Really, you can see lovely price action there, nice spike, and then a couple of spikes here, currently holding it up. In terms of the 4 hour, what we're looking at on the 4 hour, so if we draw a fib from the low of this chart to the high, you can see the 61.8% is sort of, you get some nice action around there, also nice resistance around there, and there's 50%, and then if we zoom in, you can see there nice support coming out at the 50%. We're sort of grinding lower at the minute, so buyers will be looking to hang on to this sort of 61.8% retracement. So keep an eye out on the price action there. If you get some nice reversals, I wouldn't be surprised to see it rotate it higher, but currently it is making lower highs here, so the sellers are still in play on this one and keeping it down. The buyers will just need to see this hold up and just break this trend line resistance for it to get any sort of momentum towards the upside. But no, there's some interesting levels to look out for on this dollar Swiss. A nice trend line as well, and a decent fib, so keep an eye on that. That's how I'd have my chart personally set up for the week. Let's have a look at the Aussie. In terms of this Aussie, I'm just going to zoom in a bit here. Keep in perspective, we spoke about this fib many times, and it's still good to keep it up on there because this 0% line is a really key, interesting level. Of course, it was really nice support, and if you flip it to this this daily, it's acted as previous resistance as well. So nice support and then previous resistance. So let's say if it comes back down here, keep an eye out on this 0.8846s to see what could happen there if we get any nice price action or any reversals that could pop up. And in terms of other fibs, I think we spoke about this in the last week's video. So just it's similar to dollar Swiss, really, just bringing the highs down to the recent swing, the significant swing high. The 50% on this one comes in at 0.9207s. And then let's just change this time frame here. So sellers will be looking to keep that one down off that fib. But in terms of the 4 hour charts, if you scale it down throughout the time frames here, buyers will be looking at this move here. I would have thought it should be an interesting one, because it does look like it wants to keep on grinding high. We've had a big sell off here, and in order for it to come up to this fib here, it's due a sort of, I'd say it's due a sort of decent grind higher. And of course, we didn't talk about the previous weekly candle. Lovely sort of bullish engulfing, just a standard bullish candle where it looks like it wants to keep on grinding high towards this 55 MA or this fib here, which we just spoken about on the dailies. So bias, I'd say, on Aussie throughout this week or over the next few weeks is a grind higher. So one fib, one move I'll definitely be looking out for on this 4 hour chart. If we continue to get a sort of retracement, which it's currently doing now, is this move here, and the 50% is at 0.8827s, and it also lines up with previous resistance around here. You see all those upper wicks, so previous resistance could turn into support, and then of course you've got some moving averages hovering around this level as well. So yeah, it's the same move on the 1 hour chart as well. It's the same way I'd have my chart set up. You can see a lovely spike there, which acted as resistance. So if we do come down to this level, I will not be surprised to see it act as decent support. So key line in the sand there is the 0.8827s. Okay, then that's all for today. Hope you found that video useful. If there's any other pairs you want to have a look at next week, then feel free to comment under the YouTube channel, or send us a tweet to our Twitter feed, which is at MRC_markets. Hope you have a great rest of the week trading. There's quite a lot of news out this week. You got Yellen and Carney, so that'll affect cable definitely for Carney. So yeah, there's a lot of event risk out this week, a lot of data. So yeah, keep an eye on that. Have a great rest of the week trading, and I'll catch you next week. Thanks for watching.